John 6 has a lot of counterparts in the other three. This is Jesus feeding the 5,000 and Jesus walking on the water. And we could just kind of decide how far we get tonight. But in John 6, there's so much more to it. The other ones, the miracle is the thing. Jesus feeds the 5,000, then he walks on the water, and that's kind of the deal. He ends up over near Gennesaret and heals the man with the legion of demons. So it's more Jesus doing things. In John 6, it's a real turning point because the people that he feeds then decide, this must be Messiah. We need to make him king. And so he runs into a problem of being a little too popular, and he has trouble getting away from that popularity. But eventually he talks to them about, get your mind off of this physical food that I gave you and realize that what you have to do is eat my flesh and drink my blood. Right? So all that's in John 6. So it's a huge turning point, as John tells it, a little less so in the other three, but we'll touch on them probably a little bit. All right. After this, Jesus crossed to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs that he was performing on the sick. So here John is back to his word for miracles. He's back to signs. Jesus went up on the mountain and sat down with his disciples. Now the Jewish feast of the Passover was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy bread for these people to eat?" But he was asking this to test him. He knew what he was about to do. Philip answered, 200 denarii would not be enough to buy bread for each one of them to have a small piece. A denarius was a day's wage. So if you take that and multiply it by 200, you've got over a half a year's wages. I don't know in current economy, let's say you make $40,000 a year, that's $20,000. So Philip is a mathematician. He's worried about the bottom line. Lord, we don't have near the kind of money we would need to buy enough for them to even have a snack. We can't feed all of these people. But one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "Here's a boy with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, but what difference will these make among so many?" So Philip says, we can't afford to feed them. Andrew says, we don't have the food on hand. There's nothing that we can do. All we have is 5 loaves and 2 small fish. You always have to point this out. Andrew is not just Andrew in Scripture. Andrew is Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. It's like his last name, and he gets called that all the time. Andrew was the first of these disciples to recognize Jesus as Messiah. He goes and spends the day with him. This is John chapter 1. And at the end of the day, he goes back to find Peter and tells Peter, you got to meet this guy. He's the Messiah. So Andrew is like the earliest evangelist out of the bunch, but he's never just Andrew. He's Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He always gets that tag. It's like I always wondered if Andrew was the baby brother, if he was the tag along. Because Peter, James, and John all work together. Andrew was part of that foursome, but Peter, James, and John do a lot of stuff during the ministry together that Andrew doesn't get to do. So I don't know if he was the baby brother and just got left out or why that was. But Jesus says, have the people sit down. Now, there was plenty of grass in that place, so the men sat down, and there were about 5,000 of them. So this isn't a rugged terrain. This is a great big grassy place. I like to think about, the outfield at a baseball field, or a football field, or a golf course. There's lots of grass, a pretty setting. When Mark talks about it in Mark 6, those that understand the Greek better than I say that he describes it in such a way that it sounds like a huge garden. It's a big green spot, and Jesus says, have them sit down in 50s and 100s. So you've got, patches of people on this green grass, all set out. Evidently made it easier for the disciples to hand out the goods when Jesus had blessed them. Now look at 11. Jesus took the loaves and the fish, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. Now, in English, that sentence says Jesus was in charge of distribution. Who do you think did the distributing? The disciples, right? There's no reason to assume that Jesus was standing there breaking bread and walking out and delivering it to people. So he's having his disciples take care of those things, and everybody gets fed. When everyone was full, verse 12, he said to his disciples, gather up the pieces that are left over, so nothing will be wasted. I have a friend in Alva who will not eat leftovers, period. Not going to happen. We go to a restaurant, he will never get a box. If you eat at his house and there's leftovers, you're taking them home or they're going in the garbage. He does not eat leftovers. Jesus was not opposed to leftovers. Go pick all this up. But there's a teachable moment built into this. Later on, Jesus is going to ask them, do you remember how many baskets were left over when I fed the 5,000? And do you remember when I fed the 4,000? How many baskets were left over? And they're going to say, yeah, we remember that. And so he has an opportunity to kind of reuse this moment later on. But at least in this case, it says they collected and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. So you've got 12 disciples and you've got 12 take-home bags. So it works out really well in this one. The other one, there's only 7 baskets left over. But I've always been interested in why we get 2 different words. It may just be the ones that are recording it. But on this occasion with the 5,000, it says there were 12 baskets. The name of the basket is heptasporidas, which means a small basket. It's not a great big basket. It's a little basket. In the account of the feeding of the 4,000, the word is kophinus, like a coffin. And so you'd think big, right? So larger baskets. So they have, you go to the restaurant, you say, I want a take-home box, and they say, do you want the big take-home box or do you want the little take-home box? And if you take the little take-home box, it's like when there were 12. And if you take the big take-home box, it's like when there were 7. So they're different sizes. There may be just as many leftovers when he fed the 4,000, but different size baskets. And I don't know, maybe that's just what they had on hand at the time.
You ever tried to picture how the food multiplied?
It's got to be wild.
I mean, did you break the loaf and start and it was a new loaf, you broke it again, or you pull a loaf out of the basket and there's another one there and you just keep pulling them out?
Oh no. Turns out looking like a magician show, magic show, just keeps coming. And after everybody ate, you've got 5,000 men plus whoever else is with them. Everybody eats, and then there's leftovers. And maybe part of the leftover collection is so that everybody can see you collecting leftovers. They were wowed when you fed them all, and then they're re-wowed when you come get stuff back. And so the disciples are walking among these groups of people saying, did you have any left? Yeah, well, here, go put it in the basket. And picking up all this stuff.
As much as they wanted.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a little bit for each person, it was as much as they wanted.
Yeah. It was a buffet. And all you could eat. And that, a beautiful setting, beautiful, great service, I'm sure, and all you want. It had to be a
really big picnic.
A really, really big picnic. And it changed things. When the people saw, this is 14, when the people saw the sign that Jesus had performed, they began to say, truly this is the prophet who was to come into the world. So we get a different description of him than what we've had before. We've had Andrew before saying, this must be Messiah. But now we've got, this must be the prophet. What does he mean by the prophet?
Something about Moses. isn't it?
Something about Moses, yes ma'am. In Deuteronomy 18, Moses is told by God, I'm going to raise up a prophet from among the people, basically to replace you. And I'm going to put my words in his mouth, and then I'm going to require the outcome from everybody that hears him. If they hear and obey him, then they're good. If they hear and don't obey him, they'll answer to me. So there was an understanding among the people that there was going to be a prophet, and he would be like Moses. Now, immediate fulfillment was Joshua. I'm going to raise up somebody from among the people to lead the people, and Joshua's the next leader. God puts his words in Joshua's mouth, just like he did with Moses. But the Israelite people always thought there was something more. They were looking for that prophet. They asked John the Baptist if he was that prophet. Right? I don't remember all the questions they asked him, but are you the Messiah? No. Are you Elijah? No. Are you that prophet? No. Well, then why are you baptizing? Where do you get your authority to do all these things? And he says, well, I'm just the voice of one crying in the wilderness. I'm making straight paths for the Lord. Well, Jesus shows up, feeds no telling how many thousand, 5,000 plus, and they went, oh, this must be that prophet. What's the connection? Why would this make them think he's the prophet? It's the bread, right? Moses takes them up out of Egypt, gets them in the wilderness, and they're like, we're going to starve to death in the wilderness. Why didn't you leave us in Egypt? We could have died in Egypt just as good as we can die out here. It must have been horrible to be Moses, honestly. As much as he could do to help those people, and as much as God did through him to help the people, it would seem like just every day. Well, we don't have enough to drink. We don't have enough to eat. We're not comfortable. And it was just on and on. And Jesus shows up, takes them out in a non-populated, not out in the desert, but takes them out in a place and says, here, all the bread we need, I can just produce it. If you've got a king that can produce for you all the food that you need, then the worst fear of everybody when it came to Rome is taken away. You can go hide in Jerusalem. They can lay siege to Jerusalem. So what? Jesus is in there, just makes it a full-time job. He just passing out bread and fish, Everything you need is right there all the time. So they decide that this must be the prophet. And he's going to bring that back up and try to help them realize that he's way beyond just what Moses could do. This isn't just manna in the wilderness. This is something much deeper, much more important. So at this point, verse 15, Jesus realized that they were about to come and make him king by force. So he withdrew again to a mountain by himself. So he needs some alone time. He needs some prayer time. The next little snippet, we might want to go read in a couple of other places, but 16, when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got in a boat, and started across to Capernaum. Look at Mark 6. Mark's a little more specific. Mark 6:45. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to Bethsaida, which is next door to Capernaum, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, then he went up on the top of a mountainside to pray. So he's not just, going up on the mountain by himself. He's going on the mountain to pray. And the disciples didn't just decide to get in the boat and go. He sent them away. He doesn't want to deal with the boys right now. He wants to go be in prayer. And so he just dismisses them. You get in the boat and you go on across the lake. There's a strong wind blowing, verse 18, and the sea was agitated. So the disciples aren't making very much headway. It's already night. They're out in the middle of the lake. The wind is contrary. They're just out there. Verse 19, when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, I want to say Mark tells us it's the 3rd watch of the night, so 4th watch of the night, so early morning, like, let's see, 6 to 10, 10 to 4, 4 to 8. No, I'm counting wrong. Anyway, it's early in the morning. I think it's about 2 or 3 in the morning. There must be a footnote somewhere. NIV has shortly before dawn. So anyway, it's way early in the morning. He finally gets finished with his prayer. Don't know what time he sent them away, but he prayed until probably about 4 or 5 in the morning. You know, he's we don't have any indication about what the prayer involved. There's a few times that Jesus just gets up and goes out for his own prayer time, and we don't get the description of what he and the Father might have been talking about, or whether the Father talked back. I've always wondered, you know, when Jesus is by himself and the disciples are not around, when he says, Father, does the Father say, yes, let's have a talk and communicate? He communicates with Moses and Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration. God then chimes in and says, well, this is my beloved Son, listen to him. So it's not necessarily a conversation, but the Father speaks to those 3 that are on the mountain. So I don't know whether Jesus and the Father had that opportunity or not, but it seems like he would have. Don't you wish, you know, just now and then to be in prayer and legitimately, unequivocally, without question, God speaks to you. There's lots and lots of people right now that are saying, well, God gave me a dream the other night, or God spoke to me and told me, and I just don't have much hope that they're telling me the truth. But what if that suddenly was your reality, that God spoke to you? That'd be amazing. And if you had the chance, what would you ask him? That's a wide open thing. Anyway, Jesus spent all night talking to the Father so that A, he could get away from the crowd that wanted to make him king by force, and B, get away from the disciples and have some alone time. So he goes and is in prayer to his Father. There's a strong wind is blowing, the sea is agitated. When they'd gone about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the sea, and they were terrified. But Jesus spoke up, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and at once the boat reached the shore where they were heading. What's missing? Peter walking on the water, right? John doesn't tell us about it. And I don't know why. John likes to poke at Peter now and then. He may not have wanted to leave himself in the boat and let Peter at least take a few steps on the water. But anyway, he just leaves that part of the story out. He also leaves out a couple of other details that we get from the other Gospels. Jesus was approaching the boat. The reason they were terrified, they thought he was a ghost. So you're out in the middle of the dark sea at early in the morning, and they look up and see him coming. They think it's a ghost. So they're not wanting to interact. So they're afraid of him, and he has to calm them down.
So is this the only time he walked on water?
As far as I know.
Mark doesn't say anything about Peter.
Matthew's the only one that gives us the whole.
Matthew's the only one that tells.
I think so. Now, I'm not sure why that Matthew would be the one to tell us the whole story. That would be Matthew 14.
Mark's 28.
Let's see. Matthew 14:22. The disciples saw him walking. Yeah, 14:28 Matthew. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come on, he said. Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand, caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? When they climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. So yesterday, he was identified as the prophet, and in the boat, he's identified as the Son of God. I mean, people are, this is no secret. The disciples understand. They're seeing some things they can't imagine. I don't know if Nathaniel was with them. I assume so, since there were 12 disciples that were, passing out, or there were 12 baskets anyway. And you remember him telling Nathaniel, you think that it's a big deal that I saw you while you were sitting under the tree before Philip came and got you? Yeah, you hadn't seen anything. You'll see the angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Or maybe you'll just see me walking across the body of water and getting in the boat with you. So, and notice he didn't just leave the shore and take a few steps and get in the boat. It tells us that they had gone, let's see. This just says considerable distance. What does John say? 3 or 4 miles. So to get to where the boat was, Jesus walked 3 or 4 miles. One of the accounts tells us that he would have walked past them, but they spotted him. So he wasn't looking for a ride. He was. We had a lady in Alva. She was one of the elders' wives, and you couldn't pick her up. I don't know how old she was when I first met her, probably in her 70s. And they lived on one end of Alva, and the Walmart was on the other end. And Lois would leave her house and walk all the way through town. It was probably about 4 or 5 miles, get whatever she was going to get at Walmart, and walk back. She did it just about every day. And our house was a few blocks from the church building, so I'd get in the car and I'd be headed toward the office, and there's Lois walking down the sidewalk, and I'd pull over. Hey, Lois, you want to ride home? Nope. She wasn't going to have it. So, here's Jesus. He was just going to walk home. He was going to go all the way to Bethsaida or to Capernaum, and they saw him. And shortcut. They got afraid, so he had to go take care of the poor disciples because they were afraid of the ghost. But they got it done. So again, John doesn't bring all that up. He gives us just a snippet that they were willing to take him into the boat because they were no longer afraid of him. I think maybe that's where I put a period. Yeah. Let me see what's next if we want to go a little farther.
He said it immediately the boat was at land.
Yeah. Yeah. The trip didn't have any purpose anymore. Okay, I fed 5,000 people. I walked on the water. We don't need any more signs right now. We're just there. The other time that they're all in the boat together is when Jesus is asleep and there's a big storm going on, the peace be still passage. So we have a couple of glimpses of Jesus in the boat with the disciples, but not a whole lot. They must have used the boat fairly regularly because if you're at the northwestern corner up by Capernaum and you want to go over to where the Gentiles are, which he did a few times, went into the Decapolis and over in that area, it's a whole lot quicker just get in the boat and go across than it is to go all the way up around the end of the lake. They all grew up near that lake, and I mean it was just a big part of their life. And when Jesus is crucified, Peter, I guess he just assumes that denying him 3 times was the end of the deal, and he was disowned. And so he goes, I'm going to go fishing. So John and James and I don't know whoever else all said, okay, well, we'll go with you. And then Jesus shows up and is on the shore of the lake and kind of reinstates Peter. You know, do you love me? Feed my sheep. All of that happens. The guys are out in the boat again. It's just so natural to them that that's exactly what they would think of to do. But we don't see Jesus in the boat too many times. Let's see. Early on, he uses the boat to preach, casts out a little bit, preaches from the shoreline. This account, calming the storm. A couple of times where he's talking to them and they're out in the boat. That's about it. But, you know, at that point, Capernaum was on the seashore. It was, you know, you went out of town and it wasn't very far to the shore. Now I think it's 2 miles, 3 miles that it has receded down into the basin, that it's not quite as close as it used to be. Well, we could...
It's still amazing to me that it can speak 5,000 plus people and be heard.
Mm-hmm. Well, there may be a spiritual amplifier, or it may be that he just understood amphitheaters. Right? He's up on the side of a mountain, so you know they're on the hillside. Maybe the sound just carries down the hillside. But you're right. I mean, that's a lot of folks, and we don't.
How do you get them to be quiet?
Beats me. I can't keep 10 or 12 kids quiet at one time, much less that many. I guess if they're interested enough in what you're saying, that they're straining to hear, they want to hear what you've got to say. And none of them had cell phones, so that helped. If they'd have had cell phones, we'd have pictures. Everybody would have been taking selfies with Jesus.
5,000 men. So you assume that there's women and children.
Well, men,
But was there?
probably some, but I wouldn't say that there was a woman for every man or children for every man. So it's hard to kind of guess because men were much more at their leisure. They could leave the house and go out and be in a big bunch somewhere, whereas their wives were more tied to the house. They didn't travel as much. I'm not even sure, like when they went to Jerusalem, if sometimes the women didn't go. Right? The men had to present themselves in Jerusalem occasionally, but the women weren't given the same command. So I don't know if, like when Jesus and the disciples went to Jerusalem, did Peter's wife and, did they all go too? We don't get any mention of it. Let's read this last little bit before the next chapter heading. Verse 22. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized that only one boat had been there and that Jesus had not entered in it with his disciples, but they had gone away alone. So they're trying to Nancy Drew this thing to figure out what's going on. Some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum to look for Jesus. Right? They've decided this guy is the guy we need to make king. We can't let him get away. So they're going to follow their king. They get in the boats and go across to Capernaum. So they knew Capernaum was home base. They knew that much. And they saw that Jesus wasn't there. He must have gone to Capernaum. So they all jump in the boats and head for Capernaum. Why did they follow Jesus? Jesus is going to accuse them of following him because he fed them.